Okay, there are many arguments that we might make about Sonnet 29, but one might be thus that the poem reflects the ability of man to alter his perception from despair to joy. And how does the poem actually achieve this? In the first two quatrains, the first two sets of 4 lines, we begin with the line, "When in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes." So that immediate word disgrace introduces this atmosphere of despair, which the poem is interested in creating in the opening, so that we can then pay attention to how the speaker shifts his perception of his world. So in the first line, he's in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, both exterior elements. Fortune, his own personal fortune, his own destination, and he's perceiving himself by evaluating according to men's eyes. In the second line, some of the diction important here is he's certainly all alone, and all that choice of diction indicates an absolute, a totality. So this repeats the despair that is introduced in the first line. And he is alone, he's isolated, and he beweeps my outcast state. So again, outcast here is repetitive of the word alone, and his entire state. He views himself as isolated. And in the third line, as he moves, he troubles deaf heaven with my bootless cries. And not only is now he isolated from men and the human world, but he indicates that he is isolated from heaven, and it's a deaf heaven that he perceives ignores him, and his cries are bootless. So he is weeping without any effect. And even he chooses the word trouble here as a verb, but again it's repeating the diction of disgrace, alone, outcast. So repetition is a key rhetorical device occurring in the first 3 lines. He continues to elaborate within this atmosphere. He look upon myself and curse. So to curse, to condemn, to speak ill of, wishing me to one more rich in hope. So again, he is looking outside of himself to one. So here it's not to me, but I'm looking and evaluating myself and seeing my perception according to something exterior, more rich in hope, featured like him. Again, we have this repetition of perceiving the self according to what is outside of the self, like him with friends possessed, and even the choice again of this past participle, possessions, repeats the material concentration that he has as he's evaluating his despair. Possessions, a repetition of the diction prior to that, rich, and that he is in a bootless state. So there's a contrast between his despair with fortune and the richness that he sees outside of himself. Again, he moves to the next line, desiring this man's art. So you have that sense of coveting, of envy. This man's art, his abilities, and that man's scope, so the talents of other men. So at this point, we the perception is to the exterior. This man, that man. It's not me, and this man stands in contrast to the I all alone speaker. And finally, he finishes this second quatrain with what I most enjoy, contented least. So we have, again, there's an absence or a lack of of hope there, that even the things that he most enjoys are inadequate. Now, in the third quatrain here, yet is the key word, which indicates that the speaker is shifting. And he lets us know that the prior two quatrains, these thoughts, myself almost despising. So he's repeating and reminding us of his despair. And I think the key word here, almost despising, that adverb, this repeats and indicates to the reader that it's not complete, that complete despair. So he's already begun to shift in this line. It's a shift from the all in that second line to almost despising. And then the shift becomes more apparent. Haply I think. And here the idea of human thought, while he was, and this is a contrast in thinking from the first two quatrains, haply I think, the power of the mind here to alter perception on thee. Now, the thinking is about someone outside, but there's a contrast between the thee and the other men's eyes that were referenced in the first two quatrains. Haply I think on thee, and then my state. And again, he uses the diction state in a different way than he used in the second line. So we have some nice parallel structure here in terms of repeating some of the same diction, but it's not used in the same manner. Then my state, my entire being. So we enter into the simile to the lark, and certainly the image of the bird is one of flight, one of freedom. Also, that's repeated by the break of day, a sense of newness, and the movement of a rising, lifting. So we have that archetype of height and moving upward, both literally, but then his spirits too. And he's arising from sullen earth, which references the sullenness of the first two quatrains. Now, instead of crying, he sings. So there's a rejoicing, hymns at heaven's gate. Again, notice the contrast between the third line here. The perception is heaven is deaf, and he's crying, and now he alters and he's singing hymns at heaven's gate. So the structure of the poem too is based on some parallelism between the images of the first two quatrains and then the third quatrain. He shifts and alters those images to reflect his ability, the power of his mind again to think, to alter his state. And in the last couplet, for thy sweet love remembered. Again, we play with the mind and the power of the mind. Play with the power of the mind to alter one's perception. And it's the memory of love that becomes wealth. And again, this is a wealth in contrast to the images and the details of wealth in the first two quatrains. Then I scorn. Again, we have a parallel element, a reference to scorn, where he curses. Up here, he said he cursed his fate. He's also going to scorn, but in a different way. He scorns, which is a visceral, aggressive denunciation, to change my state with kings. So not even kings, the wealth and prestige and scope of kings is no longer what he's wishing for. So it is the mind here in this third quatrain that is provided for the shift and the turn of perception. The movement from the exterior in the first two stanzas to now the interior reflection of love that brings about a change. And it's this final couplet that reminds us, and also the fact that the poem is repeating the same types of words, the parallelism that we have in the poem indicates that it's the mind's perception that can alter how we see ourselves. Okay.